Good, so let's gather now for another meditation period. And just to lead us into that, so as we were saying, meditation is not what you think, and it is our opening ourselves to the central foundational experience of being who and what we are here and now. And that involves some withdrawal of our senses. Meaning of asceticism really is this exercise that we practice not to hurt ourselves or damage ourselves or do anything unnatural, but a certain specific exercise to withdraw our senses and our thoughts from external activity or external projection, and to lay them aside. So physically, that's why we sit still during the meditation. John Main said that we have a lot to learn just by this simple little discipline or exercise of sitting still, because it is the first step that we take to let go of desire. And so the physical stillness then helps to come to a stillness of mind. Be still and know that I am God, so that other kind of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, can't be achieved by thought, by mental activity in itself, but it just arises, it's there, it arises and it pervades us through stillness as we become still. So the stillness of body leading to a stillness of mind, and the ascesis or the exercise that we're doing is the laying aside of thoughts, images, and words. And that's the work or the exercise of the mantra. So let's take a moment again to sit upright, which allows the body and the mind to breathe together naturally. Relax your shoulders as you sit upright. Close your eyes lightly, and then gently, silently begin to say your word. And to lead us into meditation, now let's say this short prayer that John Main composed. Heavenly Father, open our hearts to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. Lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha, Lord Jesus. Maranatha. This is from the beginning of the Gospel of John. But to all who did accept him, to those who put their trust in him, he gave the capacity to become children of God, born not of human stock, by the physical desire of a human father, but of God. So the Word became flesh. He made his home among us, and we saw his glory, such glory as befits the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. When all the people asked John, "What must we do?" to John the Baptist out in the desert, "What must we do?" he answered, "If anyone has 2 tunics, he must share with the one who has none. And the one with something to eat must do the same." There were tax collectors too, who came for baptism. And these said to him, "Master, what must we do?" He said to them, "Exact no more than your rate." Some soldiers asked him in their turn, "What about us? What must we do?" He said to them, "No intimidation, no extortion. Be content with your pay." A feeling of expectancy had grown among the people, who were beginning to think that John might be the Christ. So John declared before them all, "I baptize you with water, but someone is coming, someone who is more powerful than I am, and I am not fit to undo the strap of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fan is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn. But the chaff he will burn in a fire that will never go out." As well as this, there were many other things he said to exhort the people and to announce the good news to them. So here's John the Baptist out in the desert. And the people come out to see him. It's an unhappy society, and with its political problems, something we might identify with at the moment. There's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of division, and the people are unsettled and unhappy and confused and uncertain. And they come out to the prophet in the desert, and what do they ask him? What shall we do? What shall we do? And what does he say? Doesn't say anything very extraordinary, does he? He's just saying, do your job, be fair, don't cheat, don't lie, don't exploit people, just be normal, be human. And it's in that, that's his message, be human, be good, normally good. Don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal. And that's the good news. It's not fake news. The fake news would be, oh, if you take my baptism and sign up for my program, you'll get enlightened within 3 weeks, or everything will be all right, or that would be fake news, false religion, false hopes, false messiahs. But the good news is that we simply have to be human, which isn't so easy, because there are a lot of temptations and tendencies to act inhumanly towards other human beings. And the biggest temptation of all, perhaps, to follow the crowd and to do what everybody else is doing. There's the curse of political and financial corruption in most countries around the world. It's not that people are really bad, it's just that they're all playing the same game. And, well, if this is what everybody else is doing, I've got to do it in order to survive. The conversion is to break the pattern of that mutual self-deception and to create a new society through personal transformation. Not ideology, it's not magic, it's just allowing what is to manifest. And that's what meditation is, and why meditation is such a powerful power of transformation, both at the personal level, first of all, and then by extension into the relationships that we have with other people, which we call society. But if it doesn't start from within ourselves, it won't get out into our relationships, and it won't go into society. So the good news is something so radically simple, like meditation itself. It's too simple, it's too obvious, it's not sexy enough, it's not headline news, really. It's just be human. It would be easier if it was more dramatic, more complex, more expensive, more, sophisticated. But I thank thee, Lord, Jesus once cried out, for hiding these things from the learned and the clever and revealing them to the simple, to mere children, to the simple. That's why we have to be simple to survive today, why we have to be simple in order to meditate and to see the radical simplicity of meditation. And that's the heart of the theology of Christmas, the mystical theology of Christmas. It is this theology of the human. And the Church, for all its faults, is there to try to explain and to manifest what it is to be human. Of course, we don't do it very well or very perfectly, but part of being human is to be imperfect and to accept and face your imperfection, not hide it, not cover it up. So the good news is the incarnation not only of God as human, which is deep mystery, but we get into that mystery by becoming incarnation or incarnate ourselves, by being human ourselves. And if that means that we don't rob from the poor and we don't intimidate the weak and we don't make austerity hit the most vulnerable rather than the most wealthy, then that's what we have to do. We have to work for fairness and justice and normal decency and truthfulness in our own lives and in public life. That's why contemplation is the foundation of civilization. If we lose this insight, we lose this incarnational truth of ourselves. We go into some fantasy world, sitting in the tube, living in our little bubble of digital stimulation. Then civilization is breaking down. Just to become human, that's what meditation really is, which is why it is so universal. Why this is a universal wisdom that can unite people across all cultures, ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. But we come to it from our own particular insertion point in history and culture and religion and time and our own personal histories, just as Jesus did, just as the incarnation, the historical incarnation took place in a particular moment. It wasn't actually December the 25th, but whatever day it was, a certain day, in a certain place, in a certain culture. And if it didn't have that particularity, it wouldn't have the universality. Which is what makes it so redemptive, universally redemptive. Wouldn't be universally redemptive if it wasn't historically very particular, very individual. So that question that human beings always ask when they're in trouble, what should I do? They asked John the Baptist, is a perennial question. And to understand that from a meditative point of view, to understand that what we must do is to be, is a great breakthrough, tremendous revelation of the most simple and obvious truth. Nothing esoteric about it, really. It's just unusual, but there's nothing esoteric or elitist about it. It's just not that many people get it at the same time. Anyway, maybe we all get it eventually, but so what must we do? We must sit upright, feet on the ground. Close your eyes lightly. Be content with who you are and what you are at this moment in time and space, and therefore be incarnate. And to trust how the body, which is always in the present moment, can be your anchor. You can anchor the mind, which is very rarely in the present moment, which is rummaging in the past, in memory, or leaping forward into the future in imagination. So the mind can be anchored by the body, in the body. And the body never gives you fake news. The body, whereas the mind, often we don't know what the mind is really saying or what we're really thinking or whether what we're thinking is right or not. But the body can be trusted to be totally truthful because it is in the present moment. So meditation is a very incarnational spiritual practice. Most incarnational way of prayer. So let's sit quietly, lay aside our thoughts, and say our word. One of the themes of Advent is the reflection on mortality. On certainly the first half of Advent, the end of the year, the end of time, the end of the world, the end of life. But in counterpoint to that is the theme of hope. So again, Advent teaches us to be able to look the shadows of life and the evil of the world and our own hang-ups, to look them in the eye and not be frightened, not to go into denial, not to run away. And in that contemplative gaze into the truth, which is what is, not what is imagined, but what is. So through that contemplative gaze into the truth, we see something that gives us hope. But we see it in a different way from the way we see things normally, which is objectively from the outside, looking at rather than seeing. To look at is for us to be the observer, and then we have an object of our attention. But to see, as the Gospel says, Jesus says, the pure of heart see God. So to see in this way, the spiritual vision, or with the eye of the heart, is not to see objectively, but to see from the inside through participation, to know that we are like a goldfish, and to know ourselves as the goldfish in the water, in the bowl, that we are in it. And that again is a deep theological insight of the Christian understanding of God. As Saint Irenaeus said, we can never know God as an object. We can only know God by sharing in God's own self-knowledge. So we come back again to this central theme of Christmas, which is, what is the meaning of this idea, or this good news, or this revelation, whatever you want to call it, that the human and the divine are merged, united, in a way that fulfills the logic of everything that has happened since the Big Bang, or all of the Big Bangs. The Creator and creation merge. So that idea, or that insight, is one that changes our way of perception. If we just entertain it, if we just allow it space to hover and influence ourselves, our way of being, it will have an influence, it will have an effect, and it will bring about a process of transformation. We have to have that openness, that emptiness, to be able to entertain it, rather than just dismiss it with our left brain as something mythical or something fantastic. And that's again what meditation does, and why we need a contemplative discipline, a contemplative practice, a contemplative experience embodied in our lives, in order to create the space for this to happen, for this to unfold over time. You may get some great moments, great experiences, great moments of insight, great revelations. And they are part of the journey that we're making. But we can't rest just with individual experiences or moments of enlightenment or moments of bliss. They have their meaning, they have their purpose, just as moments of agony or moments of despair have their purpose and meaning. The important thing is that we are on the way. And being on the way means keeping that openness open and allowing that gestation to happen. St. Paul says that Christ is formed in us, comes to maturity in us, grows in us. Just as we grow, so Christ grows in us. So again, we're not looking at the birth of Jesus just from the outside, but we're looking at it, or we're seeing it from the inside. Traditionally, Christian thought has spoken about the three births of the Word. The birth of the Word in eternity. In the beginning was the Word. In the unseeable depths of God. Then the birth of the Word made flesh in Bethlehem. And then thirdly, the birth of the Word in ourselves, in the human heart. So that certainly, gives us a perspective and gives us different dimensions by which to try to understand this incarnation. But the mystical vision is always a little different from the doctrinal or the dogmatic. Doesn't deny it, but it always puts another spin on it. And Meister Eckhart, great mystical theologian and writer of the 13th, 14th centuries, said his approach to this was that these three births are actually simultaneous. Of course, we like to think of past, present, and future because that's easier for us to imagine. And that is valid in the same way that Newtonian physics is valid at certain dimensions of reality. But what Eckhart says is that these three births are really one birth. And if that isn't enough to keep you busy during Christmas, it calls us then to see that our own experience of allowing the Word to become flesh in us is the same experience as the birth of the Word in the unimaginable, imperceptible depths of God in eternity. And again, in the mystical vision of things, time and eternity are in a dance. They are interwoven. That is the meaning of the historical incarnation. Time and eternity meet and dance and merge. So our own experience is one that connects us to the mystery that has existed from the beginning. Eckhart wrote 4 sermons on the eternal birth. And he says that the birth, this beginning, oh, excuse me. Please turn off your mobile phones. Actually, I had turned it off. What happened? That the birth the beginning, the inception, the conception takes place in the ascesis of attention. In the ascesis of attention. So remember, ascesis is this word that means exercise, like athletes will exercise or musicians will practice. This is the work we do, the discipline that we perform, not because we're forced to do it, but because we want to stay in good condition or we want to come to the peak of our ability, of our potential. So this is the work we willingly, happily do, even though at times you don't feel like doing it, you do it. It's the ascesis. You take the longer view of the purpose of the work you're doing. So this ascesis of attention, not the ascesis of depriving yourself of anything or punishing yourself for your faults. It's not thinking that you will come closer to God just because you make yourself suffer. It's the ascesis of pure attention, not thinking about, but paying attention to, deep listening. This is why Mary, in the Christian iconography, as a young girl, and she's depicted as a child, she's often shown with her mother, Elizabeth, say Anne, isn't it? Showing her how to read, teaching her to read. It's not that she's reading the newspaper, she's paying attention, as we do when we read, or as we try to do when we read. And why actually reading is always seen as it can be seen and has been seen as a spiritual work in itself, different from watching movies on the tube. A little different. I mean, that also involves some attention, but it's maybe more kind of absorption, really. I don't know. But anyway, it depends what kind of film it is, I suppose. But the work of reading is lectio, is a spiritual exercise in itself that is particular work of Christian prayer, Christian spirituality, because it also trains us, exercises our capacity for attention, not just for discursive analysis and gaining information that we can throw off in conversations or in exams, but because this work of attention forms us, shapes us, and prepares us for deeper attention. And then Eckhart says that this birth that takes place in the ascesis of attention which is the eternal birth and the historical birth and the mystical birth, all in one, that this birth takes place in the ground of our being. The ground of our being. He uses this image of the ground frequently in his language. And his important point and insight and assertion here is that the ground of my being is the ground of God's being. It's the same ground. There's just one ground there. And it's in this ground then that the ultimate mystery of the nature of God happens in my ground, which is also the ground in which the mystery of my own particular unique identity in creation, however tiny a little cell we are in the universe, but nevertheless it's unique. It is one with that ground of the divine being, of the divine. So the eternal birth takes place now in time and in human nature, in us, as we were meditating, as we sit on the tube, as we eat our mince pies shortly. And this again takes us to the theological, mystical theology of Christmas, which is expressed in the very early in the life of the church. Sometimes doesn't seem quite as frequently expressed in sermons today, but this was the mantra of the early Christian thinkers. God became human in order that human beings, the human, might become God. This is another way, a catchy way of expressing this mystical insight. God became human so that the human can fulfill our destiny in becoming God. And again, this brings us back to the Christian meaning of Christmas, in the middle of a consumer frenzy, and the headlines are going to be how much the economy has been boosted by Christmas sales or hasn't been. But the real news is that this feast that we celebrate reveals something and tells us something, first of all, about ourselves, about the meaning of the human, the purpose of the human, and the potential of the human. So the birth that we celebrate restores human consciousness to a direct sense of its relationship to our source and our goal, the quest, the human quest. So the human quest, when it's completed, brings together the beginning and the end, the source and the goal. The hero completes the quest by coming home. But coming home with now the capacity to recognize, to know and recognize because we are known and because we are recognized. That's what we enter into in the silence of our daily practice. And this is what explains the innate restlessness and discontent in the human being, why we're never satisfied. This is because we are on this quest to know that we are known, to recognize because we are recognized. This is the deep longing in the human condition. Longing for wholeness, to be home, for goodness, and so on, which is expressed socially, relationally, in our longing for peace, our anger at injustice. And it seems an impossible aspiration unless we fully embrace it, unless we fall into it. And it's a longing, it's a restlessness, it's a discontent. So we don't like it in a way. That's why we refuse the quest. Because what do we want? We want satisfaction. We want fulfillment. We want the feeling of that we have just eaten rather than that we are hungry. And so we trade in this longing for desire. We are creatures of longing because we are on this quest. We haven't arrived yet. But unless we understand, and that means involving that we support each other in this quest or pilgrimage, unless we do that, we fall victim to desire. Desire is a lower form of this longing. And that's why we take a break here on our Christmas preparation day from, the frenzy of desire, the shopping. What is it? What is shopping? So, our happiness, strangely enough, is to be found in that longing, in that acceptance of our longing, that we are on this quest and we're not there yet. And that's why we say Happy Christmas, because actually that's where our happiness, paradoxically, and in contradiction to our prevailing culture, that's where our happiness is found.